Mal Stummschaltung aufhören, warte mal. Du bist eh da voll auftritt, gell? Ja. Ja. Das geht nicht. Können wir das mit VLC auch machen, das Video?
Das ist halt besser, weil da kann ich gut schalten im Media Player. Das geht nicht laut dann aus.
Genau. Ich bin nämlich voll auftritt. Ich schaue mal, ob ich oben noch ein Stück vorgehe.
Dann müssen wir es mit dem VLC machen.
Weißt du,
Hello everyone, tuko bwana Answa.
das gehört ganz andere Lautstärke.
Ist das halt so.
Weil du hast in der Fotoanzeige, glaube ich, hast eine Lautstärke Einstellung für die Videos. Ne? Kannst du beim VLC-Bilder genauso aufmachen, glaube ich. Gell?
Darf ich mal schauen, ob das geht? Das ist nicht von mir. Wenn was nicht cool wäre, wenn das geht das. Was?
So, da, 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 bald. Da. 1, 2, 3.
Eins, zwei, gut. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We will start in a few minutes. Thanks for coming in time. Yeah, keep chatting. Don't go for coffee. A few minutes. 5 at max. Go.
Hey.
Ich habe nur die Frage gehabt, ob ich auch mal machen, dass ich dann eine Rundform mache, damit du dann mal gesagt hast. Ah, okay. Ja, am Anfang Bilder, dann können wir schön durchschalten, weil ich mit einem Bild beginnen muss. Aber jetzt.
To share your knowledge and to know others what are doing in their research. For me, OpenTech is a good platform to share your knowledge and to know others what are doing in their research.
Super, mache ich. Ja. Zwei, drei.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. And I don't take this for granted. It's gotten wet and cold. And it's the kind of time one wants to spend before a fireplace, right? And listen to stories, to old stories. My name is Michael Hauser. I'm with Boku University and a senior associate with CIFA eCraft. I'm your host this morning, and I would like to invite you to my fireplace and start off with a story from ancient times. It was in the early 1990s when I traveled to eCraft in Nairobi for the first time. The city looked pretty different than today. And I ended up in eCraft's library. Back then, we didn't have internet, right? So I scanned through all these agroforestry books, and it was a fascinating story of agroforestry that emerged before me in these books. And I had an interest in local knowledge, so I started reading about the Chaga home garden system and all those who contributed so much knowledge to agroforestry. And while I was going through this book, I came across cartoons. So back then we used cartoons, or my predecessors used cartoons to illustrate complex science in easy language. And I stumbled across one cartoon that still sticks in my mind. It's a cartoon where in the first picture, you see a village waving a group of scientists in a four-wheel drive goodbye. Yeah, back then they called it intercooler, no? So four-wheel drive with air condition, and the villagers were waving the group goodbye, a group of scientists, and covered in dust, as you can imagine. And while they were waving, the village elder, the mzee, stood up, or one of them stood up and started asking questions. What have been these guys doing here anyways? We've been measuring yields. We have been answering all these questions. We have invited them into our house, responded to everything they asked us. And suddenly a second person appeared on the scene, kind of the last picture. And a young guy stood up and said, "You old man, you don't understand anything. We have just contributed to 3 new papers, a book, and a bunch of new doctors." So back in Vienna 2024, on this rainy day, I can say we have come a long way. In the type of research we do, we have come a long way on Tropentag, because we've almost completed Europe's largest interdisciplinary conference on global challenges. 77 countries, 70 sessions, 30 workshops, 500 oral and poster presentations. We gave and listened to keynotes, we went to seminars, we looked at poster presentations, we engaged in discussions about food system transformation. We witnessed the art of science and how to communicate science through art. We all came together to explore opportunities for managing natural resources and a better life for all. Yet, we're still dealing with big issues. We're dealing with transnational compounding challenges. So, because this session has no name, it's called The End, no? Or something related. I thought about what name it could have, and I would like to call it the So What Next session. And together with a panel of distinguished speakers, I'd like to identify emerging priorities for policymakers, for us, researchers and ask how well are we as researchers prepared to tackle the complex challenges that we have before us. So I look forward to a lively, thought-provoking debate, a debate that not only explains what issues we are tackling, but also provides ideas for a way forward, for pathways that support the transformation we wish to see in future. So let me introduce the distinguished panel. Johanna Jacobi, take a seat, please. Thank you. Thanks for coming and thanks for having accepted our invitation. Jenny Baron, Johannes Waldmüller, and Mzula Kitaka. Now, let me introduce them to you. Johanna Jacob is a professor and leads the agroecological transition research group at ETH in Zurich. She has a background in geography, biology, social anthropology. She works on transformative sciences and social movement. You're using participatory action research as a method, framing your work in political ecology and other bodies of scholarship. Thanks. To her left, to your right, see Jenny Baron. Jenny is a professor of agricultural water management at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, also known as SLU, in Uppsala, Sweden. Her research focuses on soil health, water management, and sustainable intensification of tropical and temperate regions, particularly in rain-fed systems. And I have to say, I asked for apologies beforehand if I say anything wrong regarding our speakers' CVs. I sought apology right at the beginning, so I'm carefully watching facial expressions as I read to them. Next is to your right, we have Mzula Kitaka, professor and researcher in aquatic sciences at Egerton University in Njoro, Kenya. She currently serves as the vice president of the Africa UniNet, and Professor Kitaka has been a key figure in collaborative research in Africa, across Africa, partnerships with Europe, focusing on water resources and ecosystem management and beyond. And to Professor Kitaka's right, we have Johannes Waldmüller, researcher, assistant professor of international environmental politics at the University of Vienna. And Johannes is also a climate change advisor for Brot für die Welt and Diakonie Act Austria. He focuses on international cooperation in climate action and humanitarian aid, and he's an active member in the Latin American Research Network. Thank you so much for coming. We will kick off the presentation with you, Johanna. You will talk about agroecology and living well towards agri-food systems without the donut. Within the donut. I thought there was a cognitive dissonance that emerged as I said that sentence.
So am I audible? Oh yeah, I hear that. So I'm very honored to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And the presentation is there. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Right, so I want to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. We are celebrating them, but at the same time, we're totally failing on them. Because I would say, or some researchers say there are some inherent contradictions, and the economic growth paradigm is one of them, arguably. It has been linked to an increased resource use with rebound effect. So that means that if a resource is used more efficiently, it's also used more and not less. That's also called Jevons paradox. And the UN Director General has called for dropping GDP as a measure of success because it also measures environmental destruction as an increase in wealth. So he says, absurdly, the GDP rises when there's overfishing, cutting of forests, or burning of fossil fuels. So we are destroying nature, and we count it as an increase in wealth. But another problem with the growth paradigm is that it promotes a mainly materialistic view of human well-being. It's based on increased consumption, and this, at least in the global north, is very problematic because currently we need the resources of more than 3 times planet Earth. And furthermore, we also know from extensive research that once basic needs are fulfilled, more consumption does not necessarily lead to better lives. So what are some basic issues with the growth paradigm? There's an ecological critique. It says it's destroying the ecological foundations it relies on. There's a socioeconomic critique saying GDP as the main measure mismeasures life and stands in the way of well-being and equality. There's also a cultural critique saying that the super economized everyday lives alienates us from work, from nature, and from each other. There's a feminist critique. So growth is based on gendered overexploitation and also devalues reproduction of life and the necessary conditions for it. The industrialism critique that says undemocratic productive forces and technologies have an impact on society. The capitalism critique that says it depends on exploitation, accumulation by dispossession. And also the South-North critique that growth is currently based on domination, extraction, and exploitation of the global South. So that refers to resources and labor, but also the overall westernization of the world, and for example, also unequal exchange. If we look at the Sustainable Development Index from this year, that's a bit of further development of a Human Development Index. So it adds to the 3 indicators of life expectancy, education, income, the dimensions of per capita greenhouse gas emissions and material use. So it gives a completely different picture. We can see here that Qatar is being the last country and Costa Rica the first, and most so-called developed nations are really in the red because they overshoot, they use too many resources. We can also see this at this famous donut graphic by Kate Raworth. It's a model that shows both overshoot of planetary boundaries and the shortfall on social well-being, which is towards the inside. And on the right side, we see the same applied to countries, how much well-being they have achieved with what biophysical boundaries overshoot. And ideally, they should all be in the upper left corner, but you can see how especially richer countries are overshooting far too much. So is there an alternative? And what does it mean for agri-food systems? And we can see that some major intergovernmental panels on biodiversity and climate change, or the major intergovernmental panels, have mentioned agroecology in their reports as an important strategy to tackle climate breakdown and also biodiversity loss. So even at the highest scientific levels, agroecology becomes more and more prominent. And there's one quote that I like about it that says, agroecological life processes support healthy communities rather than serving as inputs for the relentless pursuit of economic growth. I will not show data on agroecological systems because the conference was full of it, but there's an increasing body of literature that really shows that resource conservation and productivity are not a contradiction, they go hand in hand. So this is true globally, but also for, there are country studies, for example, this one from Switzerland. So the one on the left is a meta study that looks at 30 long-term experiments and finds that an intelligent combination of a diversity of crops has a positive effect on crop yields and a substitute effect with N fertilizer. And also in my own research, where I compared cacao agroforestry with monocultures, we found that on average, even though the cacao yield is a bit less, like around 25% on average in the cacao agroforestry, the total system yield is several times higher. So we really have to look differently and take different metrics than just the one cash crop yield. So if productivity is not necessarily the problem in biodiverse agroecosystems, and polycultures also often perform much better than monocultures, why is then a broad transformation of our agricultural landscapes not happening? And for this, I think the approach of political ecology is very, very interesting because it looks at power asymmetries that shape discourses. For instance, the so-called feed the world paradigm that justifies intensive production that often has nothing to do with food. Or, and here are some of these mechanisms analyzed by IPES Food. Expectations of cheap food that are prevalent, past dependencies or silo thinking. So that has the consequence that we often get technical solutions for political problems standing in the way of change. So in this context, I would say two ideas become very important. First, the idea of food democracy. So that means that citizens are taking informed decisions about their food systems, so that food does not just go where the buying power is, but where it's really needed. And second, the idea of food sovereignty. That means that people have the right to define their own food and agricultural systems. And that has 6 principles. So first, it prioritizes local agricultural production and processing, which implies access to land and water and seeds and credit. And most understandings of food sovereignty stress the need for land reform, for free seeds, and for safeguarding water as a public good to be sustainably distributed. Then also there's the right to farmers to produce food and the right of consumers to decide what they consume and how and by whom it's produced. The third principle is the right of countries to protect themselves from dumping. So that means too low-priced agricultural and food imports, and also agricultural prices that are really linked to production costs. And that can be achieved when countries are entitled to impose taxes on excessively cheap imports, and if they also commit themselves in favor of a sustainable production, and if they control production on the inner market to avoid structural surpluses. And then the fifth principle is the populations taking part in agricultural policy choices. So that is the food democracy part. And sixth, the recognition of women farmers' rights who play a major role in agricultural production and in food. Most of this is actually not mentioned in the 10 elements of FAO. And it also shows that agroecology from its roots as a social movement is linked to food sovereignty and therefore very, very political. So it makes no sense, I would say, to talk about agricultural sustainability and farmers or consumer behavior if we do not review social and economic factors of power and justice in the food system. So here you see the so-called hourglass model of the food system, meaning that there are many producers here on the top and even more consumers here on the bottom. And in between, there are very few actors who decide almost everything from production to distribution to what we consume, what we even find in the stores. And that is a huge concentration of power. For instance, 4 companies control 70% of the global seed market and at the same time 60% of the pesticide market. And also in grain trade, we have 4 companies that control basically everything called the big ABCD. So one way to overcome this that has been suggested by agroecologists is to build the alternatives by more directly linking producers and consumers, farmers and markets, community-supported agriculture. Those are many examples that are already in place, like farmer-owned companies, and there are so many of them. So that means that power is less concentrated with very few actors, and therefore also would add to a democratization of food systems. And we can say only then the potential of agroecology for food security and biodiversity and climate change mitigation can really be fulfilled. One concept that I wanted to come to was recently published in Nature Sustainability. It's about food and agricultural systems and post-growth economies. And it shows what is necessary to shift to sustainable food systems. And it's talking about shifting the focus from efficiency to sufficiency, from extraction to regeneration, from accumulation to distribution, from private ownership to common pool resource management, and from control to care. So the main question is then not how much can we actually produce, but what is actually needed, right? And there are many examples, as I already said. There's community-supported agriculture, there are Solavis, there are alternative food networks, but even things like wine that go into quality more than quantity can be seen as examples. And the agroecological principles, they really underpin sustainable post-growth food systems to overcome the dependency on growth, perpetuating and price pressuring industries. And I would say we can also see this in our research. Many research gaps are actually related to qualitative topics. So that means then that agroecological food systems apply the principle of sufficiency, regeneration, distribution, and care through the observation and engagement with the complex relationships between plants, soils, and pollinators, and many more. And with that, I thank you and look forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Johanna Jacobi, for not only kind of dismantling part of the discourse we are having, but suggesting parts of the way forward along the agroecology principles that are part of food democracy. Right. Next on our panel is Jenny Baron, and she will take us from food to water. I would argue a key ingredient for any crop production, any agriculture. Rain-fed agriculture, an essential pillar of sustainable and climate-resilient food systems.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, and thank you, Johanna, for setting the scene here on a very high level, very global level. And as you see, I didn't deliberately exclude the word agroecology in my title. I just didn't think proper when I set the title. So don't take it, you can take that any way you want, but I'm a soil and water person. So my perspective and my story here today will be very much about that. And I'll just briefly say something about critical challenges, and then I'll tell you 3 examples where I've been involved with research with a lot of partners, where I maybe see you know, that maybe change the world a little bit, the world view, and then a few final points on new knowledge, innovation, and capacity. So we are well aware, and you set the scene very nicely for me on the challenges and what we're really facing and hearing every day on a global scale. The fact that we don't have food. In fact, there's just as many people hungry today as 30 years ago. So some of these numbers, whether you have them in percentage, they look really nicely and they look a little bit on our progress, but actually looking at numbers, it's quite dire. And on the water point, we usually use this number on 3.2 billion live in water insecure areas today, and this is increasing. So the water stress and the water challenges are increasing, as well as the land and soil issues. Many of you in the room are very, very familiar with this. And the climate, of course, is making all this much more dire and difficult. And I would like to add, finally, we also have to look at the funding to do things on this matter, especially as researchers. But just to get the numbers right, so we have about 550 million farmers supporting about 8 billion people, and 90% of farms are less than 5 hectares. But in total, that area is about 30% of the cropland. So you have to think like, okay, we can work a lot, and we do, maybe here in the room, with these smallholder farming systems in particular. But actually, if we want to make an impact on our food systems and our production and our environment and our climate adaptation or mitigation issues, we also have to consider all those other farmlands, which are maybe managed in a very different way going forward. And our sciences need to work on all fronts, right? Of course, you can't do all things at the same time. The importance of rain-fed continues to be significant, and especially if we consider that water insecurity factor, that we have already too many people and too much agriculture in water stress areas. And the rain-fed today is about 75% of the cropland, and more than 95% of the extensive grazing land. So it's a significant area that we have to work with. And if we look at the yield versus area expansion graphs, I've mapped some FAO data here. And you can see for different regions where you have like a area intensification in terms of yield outputs in certain zones here in Northwest Europe and South Asia. There are very similar trends going from 1960 to 2020. Whereas in sub-Saharan Africa and Australia and New Zealand area, you have both an expansion of land and intensification of the added land. So the trends and the patterns are sometimes not maybe what we intuitively have a feeling for, but worth, updating as we go along. So mismatching evidence, examples of 3 snapshots, production landscapes transformations, and maybe they're not true transformations in terms of going in a positive developing direction, but at least they're heading in the right direction. So in 2020, I was asked together with partners for FAO to provide some background document for their annual report, which was the first report addressing water issues in agriculture for for more than 20 years, I think. So I was very happy to be able to speak about rain-fed in this report. And we did a case study in 4 different environments. So one was in Brazil, one was in El Salvador, one was in India, one is in Ethiopia, trying to see if we can see those positive changes happening over time. So I asked my colleagues in different organizations, and this is El Salvador. It's an international NGO who started in 2013 working with farmers on very simple crop improvement with green manure to improve their smallholder farming systems with conservation tillage or conservation agriculture practices. Along that, they realized actually we need to have some information. We need data. We need soil maps because they didn't have good soil maps. So they invited scientists, not myself, American scientists actually, to create new soil maps for the country so they could understand the densities, the infiltration capacities, and the carbon stocks, etc. They also worked a lot, not just on the actual conservation agriculture practices, but also on community strengthening, because they realized the communities were dispersed and not very well together on this topic. So they had to put a lot of effort on building that social capacity. But the important thing here is that all along the way of their development action, they invited different science expertise to provide the best knowledge into their development action. So the yield improved, which is nice. And today, more than 3,500 farmers on more than 4,000 hectares are using these practices in a social network, and they have the data because they have measured on every farmer's field that the carbon has changed. The other one is an ICRISAT story from India, where they have worked with watershed management for more than 50 years in different forms and formats. And this story is from Bundelkhand in the semi-arid region, where researchers were invited because the local structures of infiltration and water storage didn't work under the new rainfall regime. And they collapsed and they didn't function, and it caused social issues because they couldn't divide the water and the water was too little. So they invited researchers to help them design more climate adapted structures of storage and water infiltration in the landscapes. And together with when the local politicians saw that this actually worked and they could measure the yield impacts or the farmer income and even save labor, they also moved to a bigger area and a bigger region. And this is all published in scientific papers where they have helped putting up the monitoring. So they now can monitor the groundwater that is infiltrated, the water storage tanks. And of course, it's not all rosy and good, but at least now they have a monitoring to modify and adapt for the changes coming forward. The third example is actually an example that many of you in the room probably have read about or learned about or even been part about. And it's a very long story where the government of Ethiopia has worked with sustainable land management, they call it. And they have invested in under very many governmental programs. I'm looking at Michael, is he waving his little flaps here? And I want you to think of it maybe not as a story of failure to build food security, but a story on how landscape investments have changed over time. And I think that this is a very long story and still ongoing, of course, but it is happening, and we can, as researchers, assist and help inform that story. And the science has been there all along the way, maybe not by governments, but at least by other donors who's invested heavily in soil and land management. Now it's red, so now I gotta go. So I wanted to say that we need that new knowledge and innovation and capacity, but sometimes we have to lift our eyes a little bit because we work on projects for 2 years and then we don't see the bigger story. But if you start looking at how things change over time, they are actually, in many cases, on a bottom-up perspective, going in a good direction. Finally, to manage these landscapes, and especially those rainfed landscapes I was talking about, under uncertainty, need focus on knowledge for solutions and innovation. And this is where the science have a big role to play, because we need to define and quantify the issues, document and learn, develop solutions, and harness innovations. So we as scientists can help being that independent knowledge broker into those change processes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny Baron. 3 very specific, clear-cut cases that we can further discuss afterwards in the panel. Johannes Waldmüller, thanks for joining us. You will be talking about sustainable development, beyond sustainable development in the era of planetary crisis. And you will be addressing challenges and insights from Latin America towards deep green transformation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning also from my side. Thank you for having me. I'm a social scientist, I must say, but have ventured a bit into other fields, especially mangroves and coastal management, which is kind of my hobby nowadays and has been for quite some time. And I want to bring to the discussion now a bit more of a kind of explicit political focus. And I think it's very important to start with. We have all can just look outside, right? We have suddenly rain and 8 degrees here in Vienna. We just were 30 degrees a week before. This is one of the coldest early Septembers in the last 35 years or so here in Vienna. Climate change is really attacking and impacting all of us, but the impact is of course very differently, right? Especially between the global north and the global south. And it's just a few slides to remind us that we have really social differences that are extremely steep when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. It's not only within country or comparing countries, it's really about the differences within the different societies. It's the richest percentage of the global population that emits more than its poorer half. And we probably even underestimate the emissions that we have by the richest, according to new studies. So we really have to be aware of what's going on and who is going to talk about climate change and climate justice in what kind of position. There are very different causes. Most of you are really familiar with that. So agriculture, industrial agriculture, food systems in a very traditional way, no, not traditional, it's the wrong word, in a conservative industrial way, after the Green Revolution, contributing very much to it. Global transport, we often overlook, for instance, global ship transport, waterway transport, waterborne transport, that emits at least the same as global flights emissions. But in addition to that, the pollution in the oceans and seas is just, yeah, skyrocketing. When it comes to the impact, very briefly, we really see that the most impacted world regions in terms of days of extreme heat, for instance, are precisely those of the highest population density, and which at the same time have contributed the least to global climate change. So this is really the most striking sentence I could find in terms of injustice when it comes to climate and climate politics. And then the question is, of course, what does that mean, both for the North and the South, right? So in the South, for instance, now talking about the Andes, we have been living for 10 years until 2021, we really have a long list of impact that we can feel and see. So you see here a nice picture of Chimborazo, the highest mountain in Ecuador. And some would say the highest in the world because it's the farthest mountain from the Earth center, right? Being placed on the equator. And you probably know, you're really aware of many of these issues, but I just want to draw attention to an additional one that is sometimes really out of the perspective, which is the solar radiation, right? Solar radiation has become so strong in the Andes that probably, according to more recent calculations, in 20 years, we have to resettle millions of people from the highest areas because they just simply can't continue living where they're living and their crops are not growing anymore. And in addition, we'll have an enormous lack of water because what you see here as Chimborazo being covered in snow nowadays doesn't exist anymore. There's hardly any snow on that mountain, almost 7,000 meters. So what that means in terms of loss of irrigation possibilities, potable water and so on is really striking, right? That leaves us with enormous areas in the global south where the traditional ways of living cannot be continued anymore. We have disruptions all over. We have the loss of livelihood options for many, many people, millions or even billions of people coming up. And then in that situation, it's particularly, I would say, clandestine or illicit economies that often take the place of the traditional livelihoods to sustain people with some sort of income, right? And we see that in growing conflicts and violence all over the world, that is in many cases directly or indirectly linked to climate change impact already. And then there's also the response, right, by states. So increasing militarization, securitization. We have more than 200 killed environmental activists last year worldwide, and 79 of them killed in Colombia only, which is really interesting because in just 1 month, we will have the Conference of Parties for the Convention of Biological Diversity in Cali, in Colombia. And it will be really interesting to see whether people will be speaking out on this issue as well. So in the last 3 points or the arrows that you see here, we really see a striking urgency in terms of increasing vulnerability, exposure to risks, all sorts of risks, human-made risks, climate change risks, and so on, particularly for women and marginalized groups in the global south. We have mass migrations inevitable, really, and we have to prepare for that in terms of setting up loss and damage funds, but also reparational funds, I would say, in the north, and already starting all sorts of programs in the south for that. And that's really urgent. And I'm not saying here just money from states going to states. That's probably not the right way. We really have to talk about bilateral, on-ground support for threatened and vulnerable communities. So typically in the global north, you will find some sort of approach to this problem that is enshrined in something that's called like Green Deal or a green transition, right? And so we would look for new technological developments, innovation that should guarantee stable or even more economic growth. And that would come with some sort of small adaptations in our lifestyles. So we use e-vehicles now, and we have different forms of energy or sources of energy. But basically, it just means more of the same by other means. And that is really a key point here for me. More of the same by just other means, exchanging a bit of other sources, but propelling the same model that we're living further and further. A central role here have market-based approaches. I think other speakers have mentioned that already. And then the interesting point is if we look into in the global south, we will find that also there, and I will briefly focus on this on my next 2 or 3 slides, that is also there understood as more of the same by other means. But what about in the north? What about talking about X-innovation? So the need of phasing out certain technologies or decommissioning enormous chunks of infrastructure because we just don't need it anymore. These things are typically out of the perspective, right? And even if we go further, there's also the idea of actually really deeply changing our lifestyles. And this is something I want to talk about at the end of my brief intervention. The demand side mitigation, so that we really consume less, that we live differently, that we have a different attitude towards our environment. That should be at stake here. But it's mostly left out, no money given, no funding in research and development for that within green transition funding or green deals and similar. So what about the global south, the so-called global south? I put it in inverted commas actually, or I should put it because it's not clear what is meant by that, right? But if we look at a certain or long-standing elites in the country, especially Latin America, with all the extracting in resources to sustain the global forms of production and consumption, then green transition, green deals, just means extracting different sources of energy or different sources or different resources for the same global model of production and consumption. So again, it's here really more of the same, just by other means. It's not transforming the dominant political constellations, transforming elite constellations, overexploitation that has been existing for decades or even centuries. No, it just means continuing the same model. And that is an enormous problem. So this is what has been called in the Global South really something like a crisis of civilization. In Latin America, there's a long discussion around that, broad discussion. Or as Maristela Swamp, a sociologist from Argentina, calls it, the decarbonization consensus that is now everywhere. We have to decarbonize, but basically untouched, don't touch the long-standing injustice within societies. Here in Vienna, we have been discussing a lot the idea, it has been published and quite successful, the idea of imperial mode of living, so that we would in the north continue with a lifestyle that basically is like a big, how can I put it? We just absorb all the resources from the global south to sustain our lifestyle, while at the same time using the south again as a sink for everything that cannot be synthesized or processed further in the north. And at the same time, we promote the same lifestyle also to the south, right? So that there's something that goes back to the idea of imperial ecologics that have been discussed also in this house here by a former professor, Christoph Görg, of course, I'm mentioning here. Thank you. So the effects, just to give you a bit of a view very shortly, we see here sugarcane plantations for biofuel in Laos. These pictures I took this year in Laos. Laos is an enormously important country in terms of endemic forests cut down for biofuel. Or here in Ecuador, some people have seen probably the videos. This is Muisne, Esmeraldas province, where thousands and thousands of hectares of some of the highest mangrove trees in the world have been cut down. People removed from there just for shrimp farming, shrimps that are consumed mostly in Europe and China nowadays. Ecuador is the second largest exporter of shrimps globally. I will jump over these ideas that I mentioned briefly, that once we have deforested, there are no other ways than planting plantations, getting people out, and finally ending up in illicit economies. And we'll not go deeply into mangroves here, but what are the responses or pathways from the global south? So first, and this is a big demand, the recognition of historical climate debt. So really reparations and historical recognition. Second, loss and damage I already mentioned. Reparations, indemnifications. The commoning, so that we really understand, as it was mentioned by my previous speakers here on the panel, that we have to think about our resources, our environmental difference in a different way. Talking about what sustains us commonly as a society and culture, history, that is all linked together. So we see this here encapsulated in the picture of a mangrove seedling, right? That for the communities there in Ecuador basically means really encapsulating their entire culture and history into one thing that sustains them, that provides them the environment, but also all the cultural references for their dances, their songs, their traditions, to continue, pass it on to their children. So planting a seedling really means replanting the entire community for the future again. So there's a spiritual value to that. These ideas are somehow enshrined in what is called buen vivir or vivir bien, so the good living, that it's not about growth, but it's about having some sort of balance and harmony and with nature and human-nature relations, right? A biocentric or vitalist conception of society environment. So that would require a different form of attuning to the environment. So people in the Andes would say, there is no snow on the mountains anymore because we stopped talking to them. We stopped singing to them. That is the main reason. It's not just climate change, it's because we have lost our connection as living beings with these kind of environments, right? So this is about reparation and encompassing healing in a different way, a different sense. And that is unfortunately very much or very often left out of our funding streams in the north, of our research, of our attention, and so on. So reattuning to these connections is really central here when we talk about connecting, reconnecting, and putting that forward as a global climate change strategy. So these are the people in the south. Here you see some cockles, collectors in the mangroves in Ecuador. You see them in Vietnam, small-scale fishers in Madagascar, and so on, that I've been working with over the past 10 to 15 years, who really reproduce these ideas that are taken up later on by feminist ecology, talking about reproductive social care, social environmental care, and so on. But it's them, really, who are acting much more, I would say, than many people in the north on the ground for preserving the environments that are so key for preserving our global climate. And this is really what I want to bring across here. And then also close that with connecting to my first part. We have the same climate change impact globally, yeah, but it's really different if we go a bit down the social strata in the different societies. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Johannes Waldmüller. In my preparation, I was hoping for thought-provoking contributions, and I think we're right in the middle of it. No. Yes. Okay. Next on our panel is Nsula Kitaka. And Professor Kitaka will ask a simple but profound question. Are corporations and partnerships, the transformation recipe to sustainable development in times of crisis? And if yes, what kind of partnerships do we need?
Thank you so much. I know my introduction was like I'm involved in several partnership and cooperation, but I want to look at this topic from a bird's eye. And that's why you can see I put the word recipe. And the reason why I put the word recipe is because to cook a dish, you need ingredients. And therefore, you're asking yourself, the partnerships we have, the corporations we have, do they have the ingredients to take us to where we want to be? And I'll look back and say, do we need corporations and partnership as pathways addressing sustainable development? And are we able to do it? Or do we need a kickstart? Just like the sprinters, whereby for you to run, you need that kickstart or the block starter to expel you so that you can get to your destination with the energy you require. Now I'm going to focus this on SDG 17. I know you've heard a lot about SDGs in this forum, and I'm asking myself, is the SDG 17 the block starter for us to be able to move or maybe to have corporations and partnerships which can give us sustainable development? And when I look at the SDG 7, it talks about strengthening the means of implementation. And I think for me, the key word was strengthening the means of implementation and also to reach to global partnership for sustainable development. Now let's look at the big conversation. We all know how powerful our economic and political cooperation and partnership are. And I know there are many, but allow me today to just speak to as the base of my discussion. And I picked the European Union. When you look at the logo, it totally shows inclusivity. The round circles, everybody is into it. Look at the African logo. The continent is shown, there is light shining in the whole continent, meaning again, inclusivity. And I decided to just take two words in which they explain. For the European Union, the key word is your gateway. We know what a gateway is. For you to get in, you need to go through the gateway. For the African Union, they are talking about transforming Africa. That means something is moving from one stage to the next stage. But I decided to just look at a performance check briefly. And I'm like, are these unions addressing impactful the transformation of the key questions in this troop tag? Are they addressing agriculture and agroecology impactively? Transformation in livestock? Transformation in food sovereignty? Transformation in forestry, water and environment, or socio-ecological, gender equality, and related social issues? And if so, are they doing it in the context of rural development, in the context of sustainable natural resource management, or in the context of poverty alleviation worldwide? And therefore, I decided to just look at political and economic cooperations versus the natural resources, because that's what we are talking about. Now, if one compares the number of states and the
total number of countries in these regions, then you are left to wonder. And the big question comes in: who listens to the non-members? Are there people or countries left behind? And again, if we go to SDG 17, it clearly says we are strengthening the means of implementation for global partnership. And therefore, I'm asking, does this align with the objective of our political operations and concerns, political partnership, especially when it comes to natural resources? And therefore, what should be our future look like, or which we are already there? And I wanted to look at two scenarios. I don't know which is the best. We are there, but we need to ask ourselves as participants of this conference, should it look like where we are having partnership and cooperation based on natural resource initiatives? And again, allow me, I know there are very many. I just decided to choose these three, and I chose the COPs. After every 2 years, we are talking about the COPs. I know we finished 28. We are now looking forward to go to COP 29. But I'm wondering, are we really addressing the real issues with these natural resource initiatives? I also chose to do, I'm glad you finished with the mangrove on the blue economy. We have several blue economy. If you Google today, there's a blue economy conference somewhere going to take place. But again, I relate to that. About 2 weeks ago, I spent a lot of time in Kenya with my students and really transversing the whole country to really see where are we when we talk about the blue economy. And I'm actually quite excited because I found a lot of my students are on the ground, really translating like what he put for Colombia, how the communities are actually using and utilizing these resources. And actually, when you look at the summit, which happened in Nairobi, in the African context, blue economy was redefined to include the lakes and the rivers. And currently, I know several countries are trying to redefine what blue economy means to them, depending on the resources we have. And then I also looked at the climate change summits. There are several again. And I decided to choose one which is very close to me, especially the S23, the African Summit, which happened in my town in Nairobi, in my country in Nairobi. And if you look at that logo, we have so many countries which were represented. We are talking about African Agenda 2016, which says the Africa we want. What are the criteria of the Africa we want? And what are we doing to get us to that Africa we want in 2063? Now, therefore, the question is, are these current initiatives the pathways for future cooperation for sustainable development? The answer could be yes, it could be no, depending on your perception. And the other question I'm asking myself, I'm glad this session was called award session, is the boardroom approach model going to take us there? Because when you look at all these initiatives, how are we doing them? Are we the model we are using on COPs, the model we are using? I know we talk about getting into policy, but I come from Africa, and I know many of you come from Africa. Policy sometimes is just a paper. The issue is how to implement these policies. That is the biggest challenge we have. And could there be other approaches in which we can use maybe to get closer when you have such challenges? And I'm thinking of research networks. And I want to just show you one of the network I'm very conversant with, which is the African UniNet, which started in 2019. And within a very short time, you can see the networks which have been created, bringing people together from across. I never thought I would work with somebody from Burkina Faso, but I'm able to do that because we are looking at this thing in different ways. Or is it other system-based, like we have the WIOMSA, which is Western Indian Ocean, or we have RUFORUM, the Regional Universities Forum for Capacity Development, or maybe the Academy of International Agriculture Research for Development, or is it organization like the Global Network for Limnologists like SEAL? Is this what we need, or do we need capacity-based network and association? And again, I'll talk of organize some of them which I'm very familiar, where we can either do it as a joint degree, south to south, where we have a joint degree in masters and limnology between Boku, HHE in the Netherlands and Egerton University. And therefore, or you get a regional aspect where we have, I'm involved in a Nile academic exchange program where students go to do research within one of the universities within the Nile Basin for 3 months to really get this experience and then increase their network and their capacity. Or are we going to do it from south to south, where we have an example, again, of a joint degree master's program within the Ethiopian institutions and Egerton University as part of it? Or do we have the North-North? That is the Erasmus Plus or the Erasmus Mundus Plus. But then we need to think about where are we going? We have unforeseen future corporations. And I'm very keen on this. Coming from Kenya, the Gen Zs have just woken up everybody. And these people are changing governance. They are changing the market game. And therefore, I'm asking myself, are these our transformers? And the unique about this group of people is they are pragmatic. I like the way Charles Lage put it. They are conventional and they are global. In Kenya, we call them, they are leaderless, they are tribeless, but they are focused and they are educated. They have social capabilities and their vision on what they want. So are we going to go anywhere without involving the Gen Z? This could be our transformers to make it easier. And basically this one, I was just looking at the challenges of unlocking the SDGs. And I just want to put one, there are several of them, even many of them are actually collected from this conference, limited coordination. But there is one I actually caught my eye, resource flow in developing countries. And I learned yesterday from the 1.7 billion of climate financing of COP26, only 0.07% reach the indigenous organization. So we really need to look at this. Is it capacity building? Are there system barriers, political barriers, as we have talked, or insufficient data, as we know, which is a big key in Africa? And therefore, for partnership and cooperation, it starts with an handshake. In Kenya, when you talk, I'm a Kenyan, when you talk about an handshake, it has a very serious political connotation. So there has to be that level where you shake each other's hands, and then you agree to partner and cooperate and work together, and hopefully we get to global cooperation. Thank you.
Nsula Kitaka, thank you so much for your intervention and the plea for a different kind of partnership. Now, colleagues, here we are. And remember, the session is called So What Next? That's how I defined it this morning. And in order to introduce it, I would like to board a helicopter just for a minute and see the world how it presents to me from up there, based on what I've just heard, based on what I see. And we look at it from that helicopter and we probably see things differently. That's also part of the challenge, I would say. But what I see is a world of unstable global order. And Johannes, you mentioned that. I see geopolitical tensions combined with actually eruption of active hostilities. Don't have to go deep into that, but we all know in which world we are in, I believe. At least that's what I see. I see record-breaking extreme weather. Johannes, you mentioned it, Jenny, you pointed to it. Johanna too. And the question is, are our climate change adaptation strategies fast enough? Our mitigation approaches actually fit for purpose? What is the purpose? Yeah. What is actually what we want? What's the kind of Africa wants? What I also see is that cost of living pressure continues to bite people. So we have to talk about food price inflation and economic uncertainty. In much of the world, established industries are collapsing. Just look at Germany these days. Is this a good thing? Because it's part of the transformation. Is this something that should concern us? What's our role in here as researcher? And then I see eroding human security that goes hand in hand with eroding trust, polarizing narratives, a great deal of misinformation and disinformation that is out there. Again, data that we produce that's being reinterpreted. Yet I see something else from that helicopter, and all speakers pointed to that already. I see a strengthened social movement and movements taking over the streets. The Gen Zs in Kenya, just one example of a social movement that spread across borders. People becoming more vocal and stating what kind of world they really want. And I see youth leaders, inventors, programmers of fascinating IT applications, entrepreneurs, all hungry for change. And I see us here, the collective intelligence, 3 days Tropendag conference. Yet the question is, so what? And what next? So my opening question is, why are we having this conversation anyways? As it seems, we all know in this room, at least on this panel, I have a feel for some coherence in strategies, but yet we're still struggling issues that perhaps some people and communities and scholarships before us struggled too. So are we asking the wrong research questions here? Or are we asking the right research questions, but connecting to the wrong people in order to get research out? So are we disconnected from the transformation we are actually part of? Johanna, can I start with you?
Yes, thank you. I would say as scientists, we really have to ask ourselves if our concepts and our ways of thinking are fit for purpose. And I tried to say something about, for example, neoclassical mainstream economic concepts that may not help us to transform our agri-food systems that are rooted in natural cycles. I mean, what we eat, we cannot adapt this to a race or descend in a market. We have to eat every day, right? And there we need, for example, to draw more on ecological economics concepts. So this is one thing, and it's not as easy as it sounds because power relations are there and they not easily allow us to think differently in our proposals, the funders and all that. It's not so easy as it sounds like, but it is also about how we measure success in agroecology. If we compare it with the same parameters that we always used for conventional farming systems, we will never be able to show the value it adds in terms of systemic values, biodiversity, relational perceptions of nature and all that. So we really think we really have to rethink our concepts that underpin our scientific research.
Right, and yet this morning when I was listening to the morning news, I heard one sentence of a major politician stood out, and I want to ask Johannes about your response to that. It was about growth. We need more growth actually to break even as a society. Yet we all have, we have your perspective from a political ecology or political economy point of view. Are we dealing with the wrong politicians?
Yes, perhaps we need different sorts of politicians, but I think the issue at stake is really thinking about different sorts of, as Johanna also mentioned, different sorts of yardsticks and measurements and assessments. So in some areas, we probably need more growth in order to tackle climate change, but in others, we need to degrowth. So I think this is the key message also about the donut economics, right? So we need a different paradigm to look at what means to be human in a world with which we are inextricably connected, deeply connected, in the sense really of we are what we are eating. right? That we go back to our bodies become basically compass for new food. So this sort of future-looking, connected vision, connected in a deep sense, vision of being in the world, is something that should probably guide us for finding new answers in a sense. And then science role in that could be much more transformative in the sense that we really need to talk to different audiences and acknowledge that we have to talk to different audiences and public sectors in different types of languages and discourses that we put out for them. I really don't believe that's enough to shoot out one classical paper after the other. I just hope that people will understand that we need to adapt a lot and do much better science communication in order to actually catch their attention.
So in this regard, are we on track anyways, or?
In many ways, we are on track, I would say, but there's still a lot of homework that we have to do. Also, as universities, I would say, my colleagues mentioned the idea of partnerships. Erasmus Plus could be a global program. I really think that, and I tried to mention in my talk, indigenous local knowledge is key for tackling climate change. Still, there are discussions of why it would be actually that important, and don't we have enough scientists in the north to do it? But no, I really think that we in the north especially need to go to the south and learn a lot there from how people actually find different approaches and then bring it back into a global conversation.
Thank you. Nzule Kitaka, how does this present to you? You know, the growth debate apparently in Europe sounds very different to the growth debate that you may witness in Kenya and Africa. But I want to go back a step and ask you the same question that I asked Johanna. No? Are we asking the right research questions? Yes or no? And if yes, are we talking to the wrong people?
Yeah, it's a middle 50-50 question. Are we asking the right questions? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Really depending on where you are. I'll tell you, one time we had a forum and we had stakeholders, and one lady stood up from the community and said, "You scientists, sometimes you don't understand." And we were like, "Oh, shocked." And she said, "Have you ever noticed when you come to ask us question, we want to ask you, where do you come from? Because we know the answers you want to hear." So sometimes as scientists, are we asking the questions, expecting the answers we want to hear? But whether we are talking to the wrong people, that could be really the key point. And this is what I'm bringing on partnership. At what level are you bringing partnership for effective change? Are we talking most of the time, are we talking at the government political point of view? Are the donors really doing it at the political point of view, at the political forum? And if so, does it get down? Or do we get really the funding focused towards a more level which can actually reach the people? And as I say, I have seen this in blue economy. Things are working on the ground.
So who are the right people then? And once identified, what's the right way of engaging them in our thinking? How to do that?
I think it's not easy. I had a session with the students. They were asking me, how do you really find who is the right person to work with? And I said, it's not easy. And that's why my last slide said, it starts with a handshake. That means there has to be a lot of conversation to really find out who is the right person for this particular initiative. It's not just a black and white answer. These are the right people. It's something where you have to really work on it and try to identify who could really be the right person to have an impact on this particular level. And it goes with a lot of input behind.
Does that mean shaping or rethinking our theories of change as well as researchers?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. Jenny Barron, how does this present itself to you?
Oh, I think it's, I'm, first of all, I would like to say that I'm really humbled of being here for a couple of days and seeing these fantastic conversations going on everywhere, people engaging with each other way beyond their normal circles of friends and colleagues. And this is maybe where you shape that next discourse. The discourse is not something that will go from one day to another in another shape for me. it's something that happens. I mean, you can see it after maybe 10 years or 15 years. Yeah, there's a shift on how we frame things. There's a shift on how we view things. And this is maybe why I also wanted to talk about these landscapes that from a bottom-up perspective actually had an environmental and a social change by lots of partners with inclusive of science and good scientists coming to inform and help bring new knowledge, new methodologies, new capacity into the space. And these are slow processes. And I would like to say, so what's next? Well, don't back down on your science integrity. Yeah, because in these partnerships, they are not just your friends. They have their own agenda sometimes. And you as a scientist might be that broker that really needs to come in with a new knowledge. So please don't back down on your science integrity and be pushed for impact indicators and having fundamental transformative change. No, bring your good science and knowledge to the table and engage with people on that note. And I think that this is something that we as researchers have to be really clear on in these complex partnerships with multiple agendas, trying to, of course, we want to make change, but we have to do it with integrity and quality.
Well, as we heard from Johanna, this requires power. I would add courage, but power that would stand out. Where to gain the power from, Johanna? Yeah, as a researcher, where to gain the power from?
I mean, as a researcher, I get a lot of power and motivation from all the wonderful alternatives I do research on. I always look at what is possible, and this is amazing to see. There's so many alternatives already out there, but they are not really taken seriously. They are not at the policy level. They're not seriously discussed. Even at the CGIAR, they're often ignored. And if you bring them in, they say it's not relevant for us, even at universities.
So is that a power issue?
It is a power issue, and I think this is why we really have to think with whom we work. And there, in transdisciplinary research, for example, we say we have to first frame the research question with those who are affected by the topic. Then we bring in the powerful people with the topic and the actors that we already have, and then we start to work with them, because of course they need to be part of it. So I think there's a lot of method on how to deal with power. We just have to take it up and learn about it in the first place at the universities.
I don't want to put you on the spot. This is the question for all of us here: how to take up what we already know, how to get these methods to use to overcome these barriers to entry into a conversation that may sound differently as we currently have.
I think for me, what really drives is on one of the issue on capacity development. We need to secure the future, like she put it, with the right knowledge as scientists. So when we have capacity development, how do we really ensure that the scientists of the future really have the skills and also the rationale to be able to just do what she said, that you are really not pushed to really go for these impactful indicators. And therefore, capacity development in terms of training, and I'm really, really happy to see so many young people here. This gives me hope. And as I said, when I go out in the field, and I take students out in the field so that they can see, and we find my students really driving the structures on the ground, then that gives me hope for the future. So there's hope.
And it sounds like a generational program.
Exactly. It's a generational, it's not an overtime aspect, but it's a question of really driving and putting the right skills to the people so that in future I always say, I can walk back and nobody notices I'm not there.
Right.
Yeah, maybe I want to add that I think as someone who has been working in high-level European African partnership setups and discussions, one of the things that is really striking is that even if the content is really good, we have the knowledge, we have the right methods, we have even good people present, there are some things that are typically out of the discussion. So for instance, the funding, the setting, the structures behind these kind of meetings, that is left to one side, and it's typically the European side funds more on that, right? And I think if we want to change really structurally, we have to start probably, yeah, with the educational system and put transformative research and research skills really high up on the agenda to already train younger students in that sense, but also attune them to the necessary changes when they come into these settings to actually be aware of them and claim and reclaim change. So that, for instance, in development cooperation, it's still very common if you conduct a vulnerability assessment, you can only do that once you get your project funded. And then it's already in the terms of the project. But it should be before that, right? It should be funded before you actually set up the project so the project can be best adapted to the outcome of a vulnerability assessment. You know what I mean? So there's a difference in being aware of what is at stake and actually changing the structures already from the start or before the start, so that things can be done in a different way, in a more partnership or partner, in a more equal way.
So what I hear is not only addressing capacity gaps, as they call it, but equally important seems to be, capabilities and eventually interest.
Yeah, maybe I can say, just following on what he said, one of the aspects is when you look at the funding aspect, especially for fellowship of PhDs, I focus on the PhDs because we expect them to really do research which is adoptable. You find the fellowship is only 3 years, and 3 years is what you require to do your PhD. So what do you do with that information? It's left hanging. So I've always talked, and in every place where we sit with the donors, I always say, I think the funding for PhD should always be minimum 4 years. Why 4 years? So that you can have 1 year, whereby after your PhD, you can actually go down to the ground and try to see how do you infuse the kind of knowledge you brought in or the new knowledge you have brought in to impactfulness. Otherwise, after PhD, 3 years, just write the scientific papers, very good for us, but what impact does it have to the people?
Thank you. Well, I take this as the sign that you want to be engaged in this conversation. If that's okay with the panel. We have our famous Boko dice. Will you handle that for? Thank you. So how does this story that's emerging here present itself to you? Are we sufficiently prepared for what's knocking on the door, or actually what's already sitting in our living room? And I guess you can throw it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I actually have a question for Johannes. Thank you very much for your interesting presentations highlighting the overview of the dynamic on Global North and Global South. Because I'm from the Global South, I'm from Indonesia, but doing my PhD in Germany, University of Hohenheim, and I'm in the 7th year. So I'm not even in the 4th year, but I hope that I can contributing to Indonesia specifically. That's why I'm here in Tropentag, including myself, to join in the high-level discussions here. And then the questions for you, based on your expertise in international environmental politics and development, how do you perceive the impact of the selective regulations from the Global North, for example, UDR, or common agricultural policies in the EU perspectives to the broader Global South, for example, the Latin America, Southeast Asia, and other countries, because do these policies adequately address the challenges faced by developing regions, as I mentioned earlier, because or these risk the existing inequalities, and then because as far as I know, that those policies are impacting, especially the smallholder farmers, also impacting the deforestations and then sustainability in the most of regions of Global South. So I would like to hear your perspective on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would like to collect 2 more comments. You have a tough challenge before you. And please use the dynamic nature of this.
Stefanie Lemke, Institute of Development Research. Thank you so much for these discussions and presentations. I would like to follow up briefly on what Johanna has said, where you get your strength and your energy. So I can also say, we all know the huge challenges, but I gain my strength from the local initiatives, from the civil society actors I work with, and from that kind of engagement. And I've seen changes over the past decades in funding. I would like to mention the ÖAD, the peer program, commissioned by ÖAD and funded by ADA, because they fund preparatory funding. And that enabled us, for example, to go to Uganda, to meet local actors, local farmers and other people to co-design and co-develop what they actually want to do. And if we don't have this time, we cannot set up a meaningful project. So this has not happened in the past. I see also in Germany, some funders go to this kind of approach. Thank you. To have prep meetings, enough time to prepare. And one last quick comment, time is actually what we need most. And a beautiful method is participant observation. And I encourage all master students and PhD students not to rush in with a questionnaire, but to go and get into the field, meet people informally, do narrative walks, things like that, because people will tell you what the issues are. They will exactly be able to share what their needs are or what their concerns are. And that's a good basis then to share knowledge, to bridge the different knowledge systems. And this is nothing new, but it has to become stronger. We need many more of these initiatives, and often we need time. We don't need so much money, but we need time. Thank you.
So again, Johanna, this will be for you. How to make it stronger? If you could add that aspect. Okay, let's take two more and then.
Marie-Louise Matis, BioVision Foundation, Switzerland. Thank you, Professor, for raising that point of adding a fourth year. I would strongly support that. As long as this is not yet the case, I would still like to encourage all of you who are doing research to get your knowledge out to people who would like to use it. In the last 4 years, I have never been approached by a single researcher who told me, hey, we found something interesting in your area, why don't you use it? And I think it's very important not to only publish in scientific articles, not to only write blog entries on homepages, but really look for people who could be interested in what you're doing and don't hesitate to simply write them an email.
So make civil society part of the theory of change, no? If I may paraphrase that. Thanks, strong comment. There was one.
At the back.
I lost track. No?
At the back.
Okay, then we have a colleague here. I hope you still keep track of all the issues.
At the back,
Yes, hello. And then I would like to add to because you just mentioned something. And my name is Silke from the Center for Rural Development at Humboldt University to Berlin. And with this idea in mind, we work with our student. Everyone is a researcher, being it is a scientist, a farmer, a woman, a man, an older, a young, a Gen Z or whatever. So everybody is a researcher, but we maybe, some of us here are scientists, academia. Okay, we look at the kind of knowledge in a horizontal way because we maybe compare literatures from all over the world. We have methodologies, we try to standardize and so on, while other people maybe have this vertical knowledge from older to younger generation and next generation, which is sometimes very specific, very interesting. And that's why we get this interesting richness also into our research, all the perspectives, because they are sometimes so localized when we work globally, and we are surprised. And that's why I think with this in mind, we have a totally different understanding also. And that meaning, I would even go further and say, no research without being as a dissemination or working with these people you're researching with and not about. Never. This should be out. Thank you.
Thank you. And before you throw the dice, let's do it more dynamic. And can you throw it back? There was a gentleman at the back who wanted to speak. To break the ping pong a bit.
This
Yeah.
far. Maybe I take someone in.
There may be bridging partners in between.
Oh. Thank you very much. My name is Ferdinand from the University of Hohenheim. I am particularly intrigued by your presentation, Professor Nzula Nitaka. And therefore, I had this question moving beyond the boardroom approach. So my question is, how can we leverage of our powerful research networks and independent brokership role and with integrity to influence policy implementation? Question is, could we actually do this? Can we use our skills as scientists and as researchers to impact or influence policy, not just policy making, but policy implementation? That's a yes or no question. And if it is yes, how would we actually do this? Now, when you answer this, since you consider we are your students and yeah, you're young scientists, I would like that you use more practical examples and for us to be able to conceptualize your response to this question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have had 5 interventions. Let me close that round for now. Dear panelists, the floor is all yours.
Okay, I can very briefly start. Thank you very much for those questions. I think all these comments somehow speak to a shifting role of what research and researching entails, it should be. And I fully agree with that in the sense of, as scientists and researchers, we probably cannot do it all, right? We have to focus on what we can do best. But universities can be super supportive or should be super supportive in actually transforming our knowledge into digestible bits and parcels for other audiences. And I think there's still a lot to do there in many institutions, both in the North and the South. This said, thank you for a question on Indonesia or the spillover effects of agricultural policies or not only agricultural, an entire series of Northern politics that impact negatively in the South. So for Europe, really, there is this policy framework called political coherence for sustainable development. And in all countries, governments are actually called upon to look at these spillover effects between the North and South and try to diminish the negative impacts at the very beginning. But then there is some sort of glass ceiling there where we have the knowledge and we have the researchers putting forward that, but then the politics didn't change. And that has to do also with what I just mentioned earlier, that we probably have to have other sort of translational mechanisms in place where we can actually really address those who have these kind of advocacy, lobbying kind of functions. Sometimes it's more the civil society, not so much the universities. Sometimes development cooperation, sometimes others that have actually power to speak to people in ministries in a different way so that they understand that there are these spillover effects and we have to take them seriously. In Austria, we still have a long way to go, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you. Johanna Jacobi, I know you have to leave early. What's your take?
Okay, thank you. On the question how we can become stronger as scientists, but also in our analysis, I would say there are several points to consider. Agroecology is a global movement. So farmers and consumers and everything in between are organized. In La Via Campesina, for example, it's maybe the biggest social movement worldwide with 200 to 300 million members. And often when I start a research project, I look what is locally going on in terms of agroecology that's organized. No? I think that is really interesting. The slide I showed was from AFSA, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. So they are organizing more and more, and I think they do very interesting work from bottom up, because of course bottom up work is much better in this case than top down. And in our analysis, I think we can strengthen ourselves also by organizing among critical scientists, doing different types of analysis. And there one point is really to be much more aware of environmental and social injustice. On the first day we heard, for example, there is no peaceful world, or only without hunger can there be a peaceful world. But I would say only in a peaceful world, there's no hunger, because from historical analysis, we know that almost all famines are human-made, right? We can see it now in Gaza and Sudan and other places. Mostly they are human-made and not so much a question of productivity. So we have to ask this question. We have to link them with our analysis much more and organize also among critical researchers.
Thank you. Jenny and Sula.
Do you want to say something? I had a specific question, and this.
And it's an open reflection to everything you've heard.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your question. I think it is also going to address on how you get strong, and especially the fact that you said, how do we influence policy, and not only in policy making, but in implementation. I think it is very important when you are doing your research, the first question you ask yourself is, who is the user of my outputs? You need to really have this very well spelled out. And how will this information get down to the user? Because sometimes we do research. I know a lot of students go and give questionnaires to farmers, to everybody, but you are just getting information like what you said. You've just done another paper, and we walk away and go. So nowadays what we do is, and I think you said a good example, I'll just give an example, a very brief example of one of the projects I'm running in terms of wetland management. We're looking at transformative pathways in wetlands management. And the target is to look at co-management between the stakeholders. So at that point, you have the stakeholders at different levels in terms of governance, in terms of the national government, in terms of the users, the community users, and other business people around it. And in one of the cases, we have the communities had actually taken the county government to court because they felt the county government was actually using the natural resources, which is one of the wetlands, and giving it to an investor. And it became a big issue in public and everything. And we had, during our research, this was because we are looking at management strategies. We put everybody in one room. But one of the things we do, when you put everybody in one room, don't go there saying, I'm Kitaka. We actually don't give name tags, number one. We don't introduce ourselves. Nobody knows who is in the room. And we bring the big question on spot. And we all discuss, you don't know who is in the room. And then eventually, you actually realize everybody who works there is there and with an answer. And I think this community realized they were making a decision with the wrong information. And they actually withdrew the case from court. And the county government took up the issue because the target is to see it going to an implementation plan for the government, meaning that an action can be taken. So there are many ways, and in that way, a discussion starts. So there are many examples you can do. So you need to ask yourself, who is the consumer of my information? And how do I get the research output I have be used in implementation, in management over certain natural resources or for sustainable resources or in decision making? So you have to look at the scenario. There's no straight path on how you do that. And how you get strength on that. Today, citizen science is a big thing. I know it's a very big discussion. And I think I'll also want to put a challenge to us, especially the people within the editors of journals. A lot of people think when you bring a paper with citizen science, it's not a worthy paper being published. I just had one published in a big journal, and it was a struggle because they were not understanding what is it I'm doing, because I'm giving a paper which is actually going to bring aspects of how you can utilize this information on the ground. So I think professors in this room, as editors, we also need to start looking at ourselves and saying, what are we doing? Is it the direction we want to go? We want hard science, but we also want usability of the science in top journals.
Thank you.
Can I
So
ask
Joanna Jakobe has to leave. Please join me with an applause. Jenny.
Yeah, so we have a lot of good ideas and we have to improve, etc., etc. But one thing that is actually happening is that research is getting less funding, and indeed agriculture research. even though we talk about food systems and the impacts and the challenges are fundamental to humanity. And I know that it's not the people in this room who makes those decisions, but it's worth being conscious about, like, what can we do when our resources are getting less, which are contradicting the fact that we need to do more, and not just in natural science, but social science as well. So one of the challenges is, of course, that we don't have data and infrastructure, so we can do citizen science, but we still have to do basic science as well. And the next user of basic science might not be a farmer or a politician, but the next user is another academic. So if you think about where your science is going, don't be afraid if it happens to be another user, another academic user who's using your science. This is still valid. So please don't back down from that science integrity I was mentioning. And I would like to add, indeed, we have to be better as professors, etc., looking in our journals, but we also need to be better in building that research infrastructure and capacity for the future, because what we are building today in research infrastructure is the papers and the science coming out tomorrow. And so whilst we do good science today, that's because our previous generations built that infrastructure and those facilities, or the library you were talking about in the beginning. So we have a lot to do, not just science and communication, but also making sure the structures are there for next. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, we are slightly behind schedule, but those who came late, we also started late, and we'll make up for it. Now, I want to introduce a quick exercise, a response to a question. What will you do differently from now onwards? And the good thing with that microphone is it doesn't hurt, but you only can say one thing. So if I get it, may I have it for a second? The question posed to me, I'll say I'll continue talking. No, I'll talk to politicians more frequently. So that's what I'm gonna change. So who would like to have the next? And it's a fast game. It's fast.
Just throw it. Just throw it.
Thank you so much.
It's a fast game.
Yeah. So I would like to say that making crossing borders easy would definitely help researchers from different parts of the world do better research and being able to know more people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Throw it like a wedding, like, yeah. Whoa.
Okay, I think reaching out to practitioners like NGOs that are working in the field would be one thing to start doing more often.
What I will do differently is to stop government partnerships that go between the EU and the government and find a way to get it directly to the local people. And so I will break this gap.
That's the way.
In general, communicate more my science to everyone, even like the, let's say, normal people that have nothing to do with agriculture or science, to try to communicate in it in an easy way and own it. Like, especially now when it's like fake news and all of that, like own it and communicate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I guess I would echo a lot of the comments, basically thinking about how, if I was going to do something differently, it's really about stepping outside of my comfort zone, right? And reaching out to groups or stakeholders that I don't usually engage with. So trying to meet as many local farmers, hear from them, hear their perspective, and then try to provide what I can, take that in, kind of integrate that into what I'm doing, and then speak not just with my voice, but with their voice as well. So that's what I do.
For me, make your research more accessible and open to everyone. Don't just put it in your CV as to strengthen your profile. We have so many social media now that we can make our research understandable, especially the users, the farmers, and the policymakers.
Throw it.
Yeah, you.
Okay, thank you. I personally believe that we have to focus on working rather than reporting. What I am looking from the global south, especially people are worried about how to report rather than how to work. So that's what I want to say.
And the final one for now.
Final one. No one says science.
Okay. I'm a student researcher and currently working with some sedentary ruminant farmers in northern Ghana.
Thank you so much. Please return the flying mic. Be careful. Now, exciting panel. I'll invite you for your take-home remark, your message, your key insight in a sentence. Who would like to start? There's no order.
Okay, I'll say
Jenny.
incredibly inspiring days, and thank you, and lots of more good work to be done in the future. So thank you.
No, we're really glad to have participated and learned a lot at this conference, seeing you all coming here. I really hope that Boku and other institutions will, as I touched upon earlier, spread the key messages and the knowledge that has been advanced here at the conference to the Austrian public. I hope that will be happening because there's really much that should go into further public debates here. Thank you very much.
And also for me is to thank the Tupentag team for really inviting me to participate in this very unique forum. I've been to many conferences, but this was actually very unique. And my message is just one. Let's continue the discussion. Let it not end here for the next Tupentag. Let's infuse some of the information we got here to the right places, and let's partner. Thank you.
And with that, I'd like to close the panel. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
how's your energy? Still okay, no? I hope. Stephanie Lemke wants to introduce a game, no? An exercise. Good energy, good. I feel a lot of energy in this room. Now, next on the agenda is something very close to my heart. Because one thing I'm really grateful for that Tupentag does, it links science with arts. Because if you can't write about it, if you can't speak about it, show it, express it. And one way of doing this is through photography. So it is my pleasure to welcome Michael Bündrup and from the German Institute of Development and Sustainability, and Marco Höttke from Let's Plant, who will take us through the photo competition Best Photo Series Award.
Yeah. Yeah, good afternoon or good noon. I think indeed this session fits very well into the discussion that we had just so now. Photos and photo stories as part of communication of good science or of science. I'm here as a member of an NGO, or we are a member of an NGO. Please introduce also my CEO.
I am the president. This one. My name is Marco Höttke. I'm the president of the NGO Let's Plant, and I am proud and thankful to be here, even though it's a little bit of a surprise to be down here now. And we would like to introduce the winners of this year's Let's Plan photo competition to you.
Just a very few words on Let's Plant. Let's Plant is an NGO devoted to landscape management and rehabilitation with a focus on trees as key components of many landscapes. And the photo competition is one of our activities together with Tropentag, and the core idea is to venture problems and their solutions in a working area, in our working area, by combining good pictures with stories with substance, and usually by young people. And I think that is a combination that is potentially very attractive and convincing to not only to us, but to the public. And we try to spread these pictures and stories beyond Tropentag participants to a broader public. For example, we will exhibit this year's winners' pictures at the Town Hall of Bonn. We exhibited already early this year a collection of last year's pictures at GIZ Bonn canteen, so it's a very good place to make them broadly visible. And I'm in contact with the UNCCD to exhibit with them. And with time and a broader collection, we hopefully be able to sustain even more visible exposure formats. And of course, and that is one word in own interest, we also want to lure people into these activities and with collaborations into our NGO. And you all are welcome, and you find our contact data on the call for the competition on the Tropentag homepage. And now a few corner data. We received 15 contributions from 11 countries. We selected them by a jury of members of Let's Plant, and together with Julia Mendes from BOKU. And now the pictures will start. We have always the picture and then a short video message by the prize winners. 1, 2, maybe 3 minutes. And I start now. Okay, we start with Bona Antoinette from Côte d'Ivoire. And we need
the University Félix Houphouët Côte d'Ivoire and the Leibniz Center for Agricultural Landscape Research in Germany. We are in February 2024 in Abenguru, Côte d'Ivoire, under the blue sky where life seems suspended. A mosaic color where every species finds its space. Water, a motor of life, feeds, grasslands, rivers, production system, and forests. Around these rivers, life abounds. Birds sing, and cattle drink peace. My photo taken in this refuge of biodiversity reveal the beauty and the fragility of this ecosystem, but the balance is treated by the sustainable agricultural practices and climate change. This photo is a testimony to this coexistence, a call to good agricultural practices, and a cry of we allow to preserve this unique natural and cultural heritage. Thank you.
person say this was the third prize of our single photo. And she did it, of course, in a very nice way. The others will be, thank you. The others will be a little bit less professional. We have to show the pictures and the photo and the video message separately. So this is the second prize of the single picture. It's from Farzin Nourasamani from Iran. And we have a fan club here. So that is a picture, not a landscape as you see. It is a picture which, you see that is a picture not of a landscape, but it is a picture which reminds of natural disasters in Iran. And She has the message. He has the
Hello, everyone. I would like to Hello, everyone. I would like to thank Let's Planet TV and Turpentine for organizing this amazing competition and also for awarding me the second prize. My name is Farzin Nouri Samani. I'm from Iran, and at the moment I'm pursuing a master's degree in landscape ecology at the University of Hohenheim, Stuttgart, Germany. Before going to academia, I was involved in environmental NGOs, and I've always had a passion for using art, whether it's photography, videography, or music, to bridge the gap between scientific discoveries and public understanding. This photograph, Echoes of Vanished Oasis, has a very special place in my heart. I took this picture in the central part of Iran, in my father's village, where I spent many summers as a child. This image captured a dried up water collection pool in the fields that my family has farmed for many generations. This pool was once a symbol of life, but at the moment, because of the drought in the region, it stands empty. This change is just not in the landscape, but also it's a loss of memory, or it's a loss of tradition and the way of life that has been passed down through generations. With capturing this photograph, I just wanted to show the deep impact of climate change that is having on the local agriculture communities in many countries or regions that they suffer from droughts. Thank you so much for your time.
And we are coming to the first prize of the single picture part of the competition, which is from Naja Sulaiman from Syria. You can see again, this is again a typical landscape photo, and the meaning behind comes from himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Naji Suleiman. I'm an assistant professor of environmental and applied botany at the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Italy. I'm specialized mainly in ethnobiological studies, conducting ethnobotanical studies and studies on traditional food systems, mainly in the Mediterranean region. I want to thank a lot Let's Plant for awarding me this prize and for raising awareness on biodiversity and environmental issues. Please allow me also to send warm greetings to all Tropentag organizers and Tropentag participants, this conference, which I used to attend and participate in during the past years. The awarded photo highlights the use of traditional terraces in the coastal region of Syria. I have conducted several studies on the use of wild food plants and their importance for human nutrition of people during times of crisis, such as the current conflict in Syria and its associated economic challenges. The captured photo shows a series of mountains in the coastal region. It's nearby an archaeological site dates back to the first millennium before Christ. This site was a temple for a Phoenician and Aramean god called Baal, which was associated with land fertility. Interestingly, that people after thousands of years and changing the spoken language from Phoenician and from Aramaic to Arabic, they still describe every rain-fed plant, regardless if it's wild or cultivated plant, as Baal, which shows the deep historical connection between the current food practices and agricultural practices and cultures from that civilizations. Thank you once again, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you in person at the next Tropentag. Best regards.
Now we're coming to the winners of the picture series. So between 3 and 10 pictures were requested to tell a story with pictures and with the accompanying text. And the third prize goes to Alexander Cano from Colombia. So we have always chosen 3 pictures out of the series to show a little bit the portfolio that he has sent in, starting with a landscape and then going deeper into problems and solutions. Here we see landslide, and finally also a sugarcane field very close to the river. So that is part of a picture story, and he will explain us again in his own words what he meant with this.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexander Cano, and I'm here to present my photos from my fieldwork in Central Colombia. My research is about how farmers are adapting to climate change in this region. With my first photo, I wanted to showcase the landscape because I wanted to give more context of the region and to show how diverse it is in terms of the crops, the altitudes, and the topography, because this also brings challenges to the farmers, like for example, in photo number 2. Here we can see a landslide. This is an event that is becoming more recurring in the region. And we can see here how damaging it is for the farmers and their farm operation. Also, in photo number 3, we can see that some of the practices that the farmers do are not environmentally friendly. We can see here that they are growing sugarcane next to a stream that crosses the farm. And this is a practice that is prohibited by law in Colombia, because the riparian areas are protected by law. This is to avoid any type of contamination with plaguicides or fertilizers, and also to avoid that these water sources dried out during the dry seasons. Regarding the adaptation measures that I could identify during my fieldwork, one of the most common one was agroforestry. And in my fourth photo, we can see here how they are growing coffee, giving it shade by some trees. And they do this practice for 2 main reasons. The first one is to avoid soil erosion. And the second one is because the shaded coffee has a better quality, so it can be sold at a higher price. And my last photo, it's from a farm where the farmer lost his house because of a landslide. You can see at the bottom some concrete structures. That's where his house used to be, and it was completely destroyed by a landslide. So the farmer fears for another landslide, and to avoid this, he's planting different trees, different covers of the mountain next to his house. And some of them, it's combined with diversification because he's planted different things. Like, for example, he has banana trees, plantain trees, coffee trees, and different fruit trees like oranges and guavas. And that's what he's doing to avoid another landslide. And with this, I finish my presentation. I hope you enjoyed my photos, and thank you very much for your attention.
Second prize in the photo series competition is by Paul Schmidt from Colombia. And again, we have selected, we have only selected a few slides. We wanted to keep it short. We were requested to keep it short. So we have here again a landscape photo from the area that he is working in. It is about rehabilitation of a natural park, I think in a national park. You see the area, then what they extract here as wild plants and transfer it to the new area. And it is also embedded in a whole cultural series, in a cultural event, and in the region with local communities. And again, we hear from him what he is telling us about it.
Hi.
picture story that I decided to contribute to the Tropentag 2024 Let's Plant Photo Competition does not represent a project that I enjoyed as an academic researcher, but instead should be seen as an invitation to connect with, showcasing the value and importance of locally led processes. It's also meant as an expression of my gratitude to the marvelous staff from Parques Nacionales Colombia, the local population of Orito that hosted me with a heart full of love and arms wide open. The pictures were taken in the Orito-Injian National Park. The park is located in the department of Putumayo, at the junction of the Andean mountain range and the Amazon basin in southern Colombia. The national park, explicitly stated as Sanctuary for Medical Plants and Fauna, in Spanish, Santuario de Plantas y Faunas Medicinales, was created based on a call to action from the local indigenous people. Faced with the encroachment of oil companies and illicit crops, the local people, led by the Gofan community, urged the Colombian government to create a national park, which was finally done in 2008 to protect their sacred lands. Since then, a process of restoration and healing has been underway. It is characterized by an explicit socio-environmental and cultural approach, which includes interaction with neighboring peoples and the recovery of the national park land as part of their social, ecological, and cultural heritage. Thereby, it also follows the stance that Colombia's National Park Service is taking to preserving not only their biological diversity, but also the rich cultural heritage present in the country and intertwined with its nature. The park's headquarters is located in the town of Orito, and I lived just over 1 month in the town, engaging in the National Park's daily work as part of its National Park volunteering program. The photos show a field campaign of assisted ecological restoration, in which national park staff and members of the local communities joined forces to restore the scars and the forest cover left by the cultivation of illicit crops. Specifically, what we did
I hope the pictures have talked for themselves. That is, of course, also the idea of a picture series. And the last, not the last, but the winner of the series is from Afghanistan. You will all know the area that he has been depicted for us from the last slide that we will show. So Afghanistan, kind of oasis landscape. Yeah, and you know this one. Huh? This has gone around the world, this place, Bayern, and he will talk about us, what he wanted to tell us with his photo story.
Hello everyone, I am Mujtaba Niksat from Afghanistan, currently a postdoc researcher in agricultural economics at Hochschule Fulda in Germany. I am honored to have received the first prize in photo story category at this year's Tag conference. I would like to thank you, the organizers and the jury, for this recognition. My photo story documents the agriculture revival in Bamiyan, Afghanistan, a region with a long history of farming that has been deeply impacted by war and poverty. Agriculture here is not only an economic activity, but a cultural lifeline. Our effort focus on reclaiming degraded land through sustainable practices, blending ancient knowledge with modern solutions. Bamiyan, home to the famous 6th century Buddha's statues, has always relied on agriculture. Farmers use traditional rain-fed methods, but in recent years, we have integrated organic and sustainable farming techniques to minimize environmental damage, protect soil and water, and improve crop yields. We also use solar energy to extract water for irrigation, a vital solution given our energy shortages. This clean technology reduces environmental impact while boosting agricultural productivity. One innovation is the use of underground warehouses to store crops like potato during harsh winter. These structures are energy efficient, helping reduce waste and ensuring year-round food security in this region. Additionally, local farmers have launched tree planting project to prevent soil erosion and protect the ecosystem. Our community-driven initiatives reflect a holistic approach to land management, ensuring that agriculture and nature coexist in harmony. Despite decades of hardship, the people of Bamiyan remain resilient. Their dedication to sustainable agriculture not only improve their livelihood, but also provide hope for sustainable future. As we work to rebuild our land, I hope this story inspire others around the world to protect the environment and restore degraded lands. Finally, I want to express my deep wish for let Afghan girls to return to school. Education is essential for girls who are key to the continuous country development. By empowering them, we ensure a more sustainable future for all. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, and we also thank all the prize winners. We thank all the participants of the photo competition. We hope we encourage them and you also to contribute more next year. I hope we will be there again in Bonn. Yeah, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael Püntrup and Marco Höttke. Now we're moving on. Mark Twain allegedly wrote at one point, "Sorry to write you a long letter. I don't have time for a short one." Now, the posters that we've seen here are these short letters. And if it was me, everyone would get a prize for putting ideas so complex onto one page and presenting them in 3 minutes. So I'd like to invite Eva Schlecht from the University of Kassel and Göttingen to help us through the poster award session.
The best. Thank you all for your posters, which you have displayed here on site or online. And it was really difficult for the jury, consisting of 4 junior and senior scientists, gender balanced, to decide which of the 5 posters would win a prize. There is a short warning. Only the posters that were also uploaded were considered. So there were fantastic posters on display, but they were not available online. And so unfortunately, these ones were not considered. Next year, if you want to win the prize, please upload your posters. And now here are the winners. The first poster is by Sujit. And you see a very balanced display of data and text. So please. Thank you. What is this? Yeah, yes, it's you. You're the presenter.
Oh, yes, I am. Thank you.
A very nice poster. Photo. The next prize goes to Sigrun Dahlin from Sweden. And also here we see a good combination, balanced also in the placement on the poster between pictures, between graphs and text. So Sigrun, are you here? If not, is anyone from that team here to take home the prize? Give it to her. Okay. Next is Mary Louise Mulligan. And you see what a nice also color match there is on this poster. There is a word cloud, there is pictures, there is a map. So very nice assemblage of different elements, prize winning. Congratulations. It's very lovely. There's still two to come. So here, a poster by Olufemi Adesina. And again, here we have pictorial elements with, what do you say, sort of comics on one hand and photos on the other hand. And this also by the jury was thought to be a very good match of elements to communicate very briefly, but essentially key messages. So Olufemi, are you here? Or is anyone here who could take his prize along? If not, then we'll make it over, I guess. So also to say that that prize comes from ATSAF. All the prizes intact. The last one is Lena Grieger from Frankfurt. You see here we have also, again, a lot of pictures, a picture series. It will take a bit of time to go and find out the story, but still it's also possible for people with sort of less in-depth knowledge on the subject to understand the message. And that was what the jury, I think, has found prize winning. So please, Lena, come forward. Not there? She was online, I was seeing here now. Is anyone there who is collaborating with Lena and who could take the prize back home to Frankfurt? Okay, seems to be the case. So I hope you have seen how nice these posters are. You can all check online, see what made them prize winning, learn for your poster so that you are next Open Tags Award winners.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva Schlecht. I'm too fast. Thank you, Eva Schlecht. Now, independent and objective journalism is the foundation of democracy. And this is how I see the student reporters. So please welcome Kevin Tellman from ATSAF, who will take us through the student reporter session.
Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Kevin Tellman. I speak here on behalf of Volkert Asch, the chairman of ATSAF. And I see the video is already playing in the background, but we'll start it again with sound. I'm speaking for the student reporters of 2024. A bit of background to the program. These 12 young, great people met for the first time on Sunday evening on a get-together dinner, had a crash course on journalism on Monday, a crash course on photo, video, and social media on Tuesday. And then we threw them in the cold water and said, go ahead and report about the program. So I'm sure you've seen these people with the white shirts all over the conference. If not, please come on stage now and get your well-deserved applause. You see They've got QR codes on their back, and they've been working tirelessly for the week to report about Tropentag via LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter or X, and on our Tropentag blog. So please either go to tropentag.de and check out the links to all of these sources that I mentioned, or just scan the QR codes on their back with your cell phone. And again, from me, it was a pleasure to work with you guys for 1 week. So you were a very great team, even though there were some conflicts, you managed to resolve them and get on with the work. So thank you very much. I had a great week with you guys. Give it up for the student reporters. Thanks. And now let's watch their final video.
For me, Topentag is a good platform to share your knowledge and to know others what are doing in their research.
Very productive conference here. It's good and very good experience to be here. Thank you very much.
First time coming to this conference, and I would say that it's very exciting.
So it was quite exciting for me to have this experience and also to meet so many people that are studying.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having done a wonderful job. Now we are moving towards the end of the conference. 2016 was the last time the Tropentag was in Vienna. Back then it was Bernd Freier, I don't know whether he's in the room, who kept running after us saying we have to get the Tropentag into Vienna. And we finally managed to do so in 2016. It took us a while until the Tropentag returns, 2024. And 2024 also has a name. Andreas Melcher. So I ask Andreas, who is representing a huge crowd, to tell us how things went for you.
Thank you, Michael.
And how many hours you slept?
Oh, I slept quite well, but I was really overwhelmed for all this nice contribution, for so many side events, for so many sessions, for so much exchange here, and for a great team here, and a lot of support we got from sponsors. You're maybe wondering why we have this here. So we got the bread from the Streck company, it's a bakery, and from the Billa we got snacks and drinks and everything. But it was exceptional. And I wanted to say in the beginning, it was not so easy to get this support and this sponsoring because of these compliance rules, which are new, and about more than 20 companies refused to give something. So this is a new challenge, what we face, even companies, we had good things. or we got a lot of good things in the past. And I want to try to be quite short with my last announcement. And I want to say that I'm back home. You know, my office is in the first floor. So if you once come back to Boku, you will find me here in this office in the first floor. And the last 2 weeks, I was strolling around in the whole campus. So I'm rather happy to be back now here in my house, to say so. And well, it was worth to do that. And I'm really proud that one can say that we have in total, maybe online, switching off, not registered, about 1,000 participants. And this is really great. We have 1,000 participants, and I think this is one of the biggest events we ever had directly at Boku University. We had some outside, but it's really outstanding and one of the biggest here at Boku. And we even had participants from 77 countries worldwide. And this is really impressive. This is really impressive. And I saw such a map 15 years ago in the United States at a big conference in the United States with 3,000 participants. And you see all the southern part was empty at that conference. So it was only the northern people who attended these conferences, maybe some are from Japan, but nothing else. And I'm so happy to see here a map filling up the whole world. By the way, Argentina is missing here, so and Albania also, but don't be so critical for these little things. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I want to dedicate this conference, therefore, for this international conference to all the students which came here, and they really honored us. And I also want to dedicate it especially to my student, to my alumni, to my former student. And they asked me yesterday if I could wear their traditional clothes from Burkina Faso. Therefore, I'm dressed this. And they say, yes, please honor our country and wear our traditional clothes. It was tailor-made in Burkina Faso from a picture. They gave them a photo of mine and they made it so it fit well, even the trousers. Yeah, I want to thank also all the speakers, all the keynote speakers, and all the people in the discussion here. It was fantastic. Thank you very much. I don't know where to start really is the best, but I want to start with ATSAF. ATSAF is our partner here, and we got this big support, and they told us what to do, what is possible, what we can do, and what we should achieve. Thank you to the whole ATSAF team, Volkert Asch, Eric Tilkes, maybe you can switch, Eric Tilkes, and you see him in the middle, Christian Hülsebusch. Christian Hülsebusch is the mastermind, and he's the mastermind, and he is also very important because he's responsible for the budget. So I hope that we will keep it in a frame. And yes, Christian and Eric Tilkes here arriving at the train station in Vienna on Sunday. Yes, and I want to thank also the whole Institute of Development Research, our Institute of Development Research, and especially Stephanie Lemke for supporting us all over the time for this preparation in the last, let's say we started more than 4 weeks and before, so in the beginning of the year and directly. And thank you for that, for the Institute, for our support. And I also want to thank the Boku Rectorate, the rector, Eva Schulev-Steinl. She is unfortunately sick. She wanted to come. She's very proud, and she wishes you all the best and warm greetings from her. And I want to say from Boku staff members from all over institutions, from the IT services with Martin Mandl and Patrick in the back, but also with Philipp Steiner from the event management, which really supported us from the beginning in the planning with the room reservation and the technical things. Thank you for that. And not to forget also the catering of the Boku Mensa, which also helped us and supported us over there. And I also want to mention quickly some other people in the POCO University, some other partners. We have this partnership, this cluster for development research, the CDR, with a scientific group. And Kathi Keiblinger is here. Maybe you want to stand up. She's the co-organizer here. Kathi, thank you representing the CDR, this cluster, for supporting us with so many sharing and the selection of submissions. By the way, we nearly got 900 submissions. We got nearly 900 submissions and we reduced them by the half we had to, unfortunately. Yes, but also the POCO Orchard for giving us the apples, and the entomologists at the POCO. We got the cooling facility to cool down the beer and the drinks, and we also got a forklift. It's all these little things, you know. It's always these little things which make a difference. The Institute of Geology and others which supported us. Thank you to them. And finally, also the TÜV Beisel, the students Beisel, they also have been supporting us. And we also got support from external, from Agricultura, from Crop Trust, as I said before, Ströck, Piller, the church, Krim, the Pfarre Krim downstairs. We got some, the tables and the benches. And the Heuriger Wolf, where we have been yesterday, I think was great. And I was happy that there was enough food there. This was also supported by a POCO alumni, Norbert Walter. He's the director of the Chamber of Agriculture. Warm greetings from him. And then we have also APITS and other, even anonymous donors, which gave money for traveling to invite people to cover the traveling costs. They wanted to stay anonymous. We call them, some people call them millionaires. So they are these nice people. There are some in the behind, and they really also worth to mention very, very much. Yes, and all the other supporters. I didn't mention all the German institutions which supported, from GSZ and others. Thank you very much. I will not name them. But finally, but not least, I want to come on stage, as they sit here, Andreas Bauer, Julia Menle, Yannick, Annika, Priska, Till, of course, Till is here, and also Gülin for the students reporters. There's Gülin. Here. Here, Gülin is representing all the, not the students reporters, our Blue Angels. I call them sometimes the Blue Angels. So we had 25 in total, and thank you for that. And here are some impressions over there. Andy Bauer preparing his technical equipment. Thank you, Andy, for doing that. Supported by Till on the other side, and also Till made the design of all these colors and emblems in orange and blue. Thank you, Till. Yeah, then we have Arts and Science, Arts in Science, with the exhibition they did all over the buildings, and it was really great to have you here. Thank you for coming. I forgot something. And finally, but not least, I also want to thank to my family. On the last picture, on the little one, there are two former students from Burkina Faso on the picture. They stayed once in my house when they did their studies. And beside there, my two sons, Konsti and David, and they also supported and helped me. And I want to thank them because sometimes they miss a father, which is a scientist, and which is traveling all over the world. Thank you for the patience and growing up that fast. Thank you. So, for my team, I have some chocolate. I brought some chocolate. It's organic chocolate. It's typical Austrian chocolate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much also to Julia for all the organization. Thank you.
For Julia, we have a special drink here. By the way, I have more Prosecco for the speakers. Give me my microphone back, please. Thank you, Andreas. You want to say something?
No, thank you.
Really great. She managed all the team here and everything, and she was always laughing. She never gave up, and all her big smile really made this possible. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andre. Yeah. Last but not least, Erwin Künzi, please. Not the
Yeah.
last thing before we hand over to Bonn. And before we close here in the afternoon, there are 7 other workshops, but I want to ask Erwin Künzi.
And me
Yeah.
to introduce Erwin Künzi. Before I drop off and say goodbye to you and leave them the stage. Now, Erwin Künzi is a geographer working with the Austrian Development Agency, heading the unit, the theme and quality unit. But Erwin is also a researcher. He's worked in Kenya, studied farmers' perceptions. He's worked in Uganda, lived there, worked on water and sanitation questions. And it's always good to have you here. And with that, I want to say thank you. I'm leaving the stage. It was great having you today. It's all yours now.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Andy. I feel extremely honored to speak a few words here at the closing session. And I'm disappointed because I had so little time this week. Disappointed that I couldn't be here throughout the Tropentag to see all the interesting research findings and the presentations. Unfortunately, we had our annual conference this week as well at the Austrian Development Agency, so it was just impossible to be here all the time. But I'm glad that I'm here now today and could follow also the very interesting discussions. Actually, the theme that we had at our annual conference was food security and transformation of food systems. So it matched very well also the focus of the Tropentag. If I may use the words of Professor Kiraka, we were exchanging experiences. We were talking about recipes. And of course, research delivers the ingredients that we need for the recipes in international cooperation. That's one of the reasons why we have, as a small donor, a very small program, but a strong program supporting research, academic and research partnerships as well. Starting actually with the program where we support Egerton University, Addis Ababa University, and BOKU cooperating with IHE Delft since many, many years actually. Many of you may know the APPEAR, the Austrian partnership program in higher education and research for development. It's a large program that we started in 2010. We have made available about, not quite, but almost 40 million euro for cooperations between institutions of research and higher education here in Austria and in partner countries, focusing on institutional capacity development, but also focusing on joint research, on really burning questions. Among others, on rural development, agriculture, resilience, adaptation to climate change. And last but not least, since 2012, we are actually directly cooperating also with CDR, the IDR, with Michael and Andy, also on questions related to rural development, resilience, and food security. Not so much supporting research, that is also included, but actually organizing workshops where research engages with practitioners and policymakers. And these workshops have a great value because there are not many opportunities where these 3 clusters of people or individuals come together and talk about challenges, transformation, reform processes, and so forth. So What's next? I would say let's continue. Let's continue this kind of engagement between scientists, practitioners like me, and ideally policymakers. And if you had asked me what I do, next or differently, I would say I'll do my best to provide opportunities where this can happen in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. And I think I'm handing over to you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Erwin. Now I look for someone, I have the wrong glasses, from Bonn. Is there someone from Bonn I want to hand over? Yeah, Christian Burgemeister. Welcome, Christian Burgemeister from Bonn.
Presentation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Maybe it would have been faster with the stickers. Yeah, yeah, of course. Never have. It's a very small. Okay. You see, I thought that there's one for me. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vienna team. My name is Christian Burgemeister, and together with my friend and colleague Matthias Becker, I have the pleasure to be your future host for Tropentag 2025 in Bonn at the University of Bonn. I guess many in the audience know City of Bonn, University of Bonn. The ones that don't know the city, it's a pretty city. It's a very nice city. It's a very beautiful city. It's along the River Rhine. I would say this is one of the nicest stretches the river has to offer, where the city is. Bonn is one of the best universities in Germany. And for Tropentag, quite interesting, we are with Gießen and Halle, we are the only university in Germany that has agricultural and nutritional science together. So anybody who's interested in nutritional sciences will find the place interesting. We have as a topic reconciling land system changes with planetary health, and we're going to run the meeting in 25 together with our friends and colleagues from the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, where I started my professional career. So I have a very long and yeah, very sentimental relationship to IITA. The meeting will be hosted on the Poppelsdorf campus of the University of Bonn. This is where most of the institutes of agricultural sciences and nutritional sciences are hosted. This, as you can see, this is a pretty new campus. This is the central how do you call it, course building, where we will have more or less all the meetings and presentations for the Tropentag together. This is close to the botanical garden of Bonn, and it's about a 10-15 meters walk from the central part of the city. So Bonn is a small city, everything you can do by walking, and as I said, it's pretty there. So organizers, Matthias Becker and myself. With these few words, I say thank you to Vienna and welcome to Bonn next year. Thank you.
I see nobody wants to leave. So as I see, nobody wants to leave. I wish you all safe trip back home, and I hope to see you next year in Bonn again. Stay healthy and all the best to you and your families. Goodbye.